faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
If you've ever been led down a path, caused to believe something that ultimately wasn't true, pranked, been the butt of somebody else's joke, been picked on, played on, or taken advantage of by somebody else's slick use of words, then you know what that feels like. The sad part of it is that narrative that's required to pull the prank or pull the joke is the same kind of communication style necessary for journalism. It's also the same kind of communication style necessary for writing a vision statement or a mission statement or an About Me page. It's the same kind of communication style because, well, it's the way human beings have communicated with each other since before we had pen and paper. Since before we knew that we could carve into stones, we've painted on rocks. Yep, it's all the same. And it hasn't changed in thousands of years of human history. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how societies and cultures, individually and as a whole, lead transformation through narrative. That's what I want to talk about on this episode of Leading Leaders. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and it really does amaze me how many people completely miss the idea that the way that you might prank someone, pull a joke on someone, lie to someone for the purpose of making them feel the fool or be the butt of the joke is exactly the same way that we write a mission statement. We want to tell a story. We want to draw people into the moment. We want people to see what we have already seen. I want you to think back to the comment made when the opening of Walt Disney World happened. And when that day happened, the grandson of Walt was asked by a reporter, how significant is it that you're standing here today? Don't you wish your grandfather was here to see this today? And the grandson said, if he hadn't seen it 1,000,000 times in his head already, we wouldn't be seeing it today. Well, that's a narrative. But let me go a little deeper into what I mean by that's a narrative. See, it's not just a narrative that that comment was made. While that's true, it's not just a narrative that had the reporter ask anybody else that question, they may not have gotten the same answer. That is a narrative, and that is true. It's also a narrative to know that Walt Disney imagined what Disney World is for decades before it happened. It's also a narrative that was playing in his head that when I open my eyes and I see the carousels and I see the castles and I see the paved stone, cobblestone walkways and I see the parades and I see the lights and I see the characters, those visions were in his head long before they ever existed in the streets of Disney World. Now, the narrative that was playing in his head had to be articulated. That image, that movie, that grand scale of everything going on, everything that would happen, how everyone would be involved, it was already playing in his head like a movie script. That's a narrative. See, when you write a business plan, whether you're an entrepreneur or the leader of a multi-global company, or multi-global, how about a multinational global company? Yeah, one of those, because we don't have any I don't think, maybe Elon does, have companies on other planets. That would be multi-global, but no, we're all just on this globe for right now. But if you lead a multinational organization, if you lead a ministry, you lead a nonprofit of some sort, you have to have a vision statement. And I think one of the biggest failures that I see from leaders across the board is the lack of a clearly articulated vision. They have a vision statement or a mission statement that's one or two sentences, and they're so ambiguous. You wouldn't know it if it happened to you. If the organization said, our mission statement is to feed the hungry, well, that's pretty clear. If you're hungry, they're going to feed you. What if it's Tuesday and you missed breakfast and now all of a sudden you're hungry? Are they going to come swooping in out of the sky like paratroopers and bring you food? Well, it said they were going to feed the hungry. Is that a mission statement? Is that a vision statement? Do you know? No, you don't, because the narrative is lost in the vagary of the statement itself. There's no specifics. Which hungry are we going to feed? Are they only going to be the ones in downtown Dallas, Texas, or only the ones in the rural cities outside of Oklahoma? I mean, nobody knows. Nobody knows, because the vision statement isn't clear. The narrative that they've offered you seems noble, but it's unclear. But see, the same kind of integrity required to write a vision statement, a mission statement, an about me page, to tell a story that people can get a good grasp of who you are, what you plan to do, what hope you plan to bring, what problem do you solve, and how do you solve it, and who do you solve it for. All of that comes together in the narrative of your organization. As a leader, you should be able to articulate that. Even if you're a solopreneur, only if you only lead yourself and the people that you influence or serve as customers or clients, you should have a mission statement. You should have a vision statement. You should have an idea who those people are that you serve and how it is that you plan to serve them. How will they be better when you're done doing what it is that you do for them? That doesn't seem like complicated stuff, but it really is. Now, here's the really tricky part of that double-edged sword. There are people who have realized that that narrative that leads people to be evoked emotionally. Think about it like this. If you've ever been to a charity fundraiser and they bring people across the stage to say, these are the people we've served, this was their life before, this is their life after, and you get that little tear in your eye, you get that little choke in your throat, and you feel like, wow, they're doing some great things, we should be a part of this. That's a narrative. And they're doing it well if they're emotionally involving you in the successes of the people that they've served. If they're inviting you to contribute your time, your talent, your treasure, your attention to their organization to say, I want to be a part of that because, man, I just love what they're doing. If you've gotten that invitation, they think highly of you. If they've also evoked in you an emotion, then it's because you're in alignment already. At least at a deep internal level, you're already in alignment with what it is that they plan to accomplish. Not for political reasons, but for a stark contrast, if you went to a fundraiser dinner for a pro-life organization or a pro-choice organization, one of those is going to deeply resonate with you while the other one is going to deeply offend you. The narrative that they use to solicit funds from you, to elicit emotion from you, to resonate with you deeply, that narrative, that mission statement, that vision statement, that about us accomplishment, they're all the same. They're all stories, a collection of stories told to lead you to a conclusion. Maybe it's a predetermined conclusion. Maybe it's a conclusion that you've already achieved, but they haven't quite caught up to you yet. Or maybe it's a conclusion that they want you to believe that you just don't quite yet believe. The better the storyteller, the better likelihood that narrative is going to resonate with you, the more likelihood there will be a transformation. Now, there are a whole lot of people who want to tell stories that, frankly, they're boring. There are even a whole lot of people, and we're seeing even more of them on social media over the last few years, that they want to tell a story, but the entire story is concocted. In fact, they use fake names. They blame people for things that didn't really happen. They pull stunts, they pull pranks, they imagine some of the most fantastical realities that really, they're just fantastical. They're not realities. Maybe you've seen these. The Jesse Smollett story would be one of those. The noose in the NASCAR garage would be one of those. These are fantastical stories that the news media made phenomenal narratives of. They made great stories. They evoked a lot of emotion. They had a lot of people up in arms and angry and upset about what happened, only to find out later that what supposedly happened, the narrative, the story, was fantasy. There was no reality. There was no there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who write their script as a leader. I help people do this, and it has the same amount of reality. Or they write their mission statement or their vision statement for their organization, and it has the same level of reality. It's a great sales pitch. FTX might fall in that category. It's a great sales pitch. It actually moves some people to take advantage of it. There are a lot of people out there that you might call sales hucksters, that they're really good at selling you on what it is that they do, but they never seem to drive the results that they promise to drive. The story sounds great. The narrative sounds great. It brings you to the place of putting your credit card on the table and joining in what they're doing, and yet the results that you're paying for are not the results that you get. Leaders lead transformation through narratives. Sometimes that looks like a father telling his son, when I was your age, XYZ happened. Don't do what I did because that was dumb. I thought it was cool at the time. It was really stupid. I'll tell you some of the greatest laughs that I get out of my boys, now 22 and almost 23 and 25, is that stories of the stupid things that I did as a kid, like when we rolled a tractor tire off the house, through the backyard, down over the fence, and into the neighbor's house. They get a kick out of that story. They would get a kick in the pants if I ever caught them trying to do the same stupid stuff that I got away with as a kid, because I spent a whole lot of my life barely supervised. Can't live like that these days. That was 40 years ago. The reality is, though, that those stories tell them a lot about who I am and what I've done and how I got to where I am, and in some places that on its own is a miracle that I made it here alive. But the story itself is a tool for transformation, to spark the emotion, to spark the imagination, to cause you to think, to endear you or repel you from an idea. I watched a documentary, if you will, this morning. I call it a documentary because there's really no other category to put it in. It was a fake interview. A gentleman claiming to be part of the BBC, which probably should cost him some money in the terms of the negative press that he caused for the British Broadcasting Corporation. But I don't know that he'll ever get charged with it because they probably would find it humorous, although it was despicable. His imitation journalism was really it was a prank. The whole thing was a prank. And a lot of it I caught on to early on and thought, well, this guy's really just fishing for a problem. He's creating another Jesse Smollett kind of event. But the worst part was I had to go back and look up some of the slang terms. And he found himself very clever using some of the slang terms that he used in the interview to besmirch someone else's character, to mock and ridicule them. And when they caught on to the fact that he was besmirching them, that he was using slang term because he's from Britain and we don't use words like that here, when they realized that, they were really very frustrated and irritated with him. It wasn't nearly as professional as he led on to be. Oh, he acted the part really well. He had a really good narrative, if you will, about what he was doing and why he was doing it. But he put a whole lot of people in harm's way. He put a whole lot of people under a spotlight in an unwarranted way. And in the end, he just made a fool of himself and everybody else involved in this project. That's the kind of narrative that doesn't serve anyone well. Still a narrative. It's a fake narrative. It's a dangerous narrative. It's a narrative that causes trouble, not positive transformation. But it is a narrative. As a leader, you should be busy about the process of creating narratives that drive positive transformation. Some of those are going to be stories of the past, of the mistakes that you've made. Listen for 20 minutes to anything ever produced by Grant Cardone or Gary Vee, and here's what you're going to find. And the same thing of Brian Tracy or Zig Ziglar. All of them point out the fact that you will never have great successes unless you endure the failures first. It's a given reality. It's a narrative, but it's not just a narrative. It's a narrative anchored in truth. No one succeeds without failure. I remember being involved in a circle with a gentleman as launching a company, sat down with the founders, sat down with the funders, and their first pushback to him was, what was the first thing you failed at in life? And at the time, we were in our early 20s and hadn't had a whole lot of opportunity to fail just yet. Fresh out of college, fresh out of school, newly married. I was right out of the military. And he answered the question honestly. He said, so far, everything I've put my effort to, I've succeeded at. And the pushback was really heavy to say, if you've never failed at anything, how in the world would you know how to recover? Well, that's a legitimate question. See, if you watch these guys who've been phenomenally successful, what you'll find in their narrative is you've got to learn how to cope with failure, or you will never learn how to deal with success. You've got to learn how to cope with failure, or you'll never learn how to deal with success. Now, that's a micro narrative. That's a statement all on its own, but probably 10,000 stories of absolute reality support that idea. Now you mix that into the larger narrative to say, well, of course we're going to be like Thomas Edison with 10,000 inventions that are not a light bulb, that are not necessarily failures. They're just a different way of winning. We're going to have several investments that don't return the amount of money we wanted to return with every investment. We're going to have relationships that we've poured everything into and they still fall apart. That's human existence. We learn from our failures. And if we don't learn from our failures, then we get to repeat them until we learn the lesson that failure was designed to teach us. A leader who has any other narrative than the reality that you will suffer loss, you will fail at something. What you're really here for in this life is to learn to cope with failure so you can learn to handle success. And if you don't, then failure's just going to keep coming. As leaders, we lead transformation through narratives. Take the time as a leader to look back at your vision statement, your mission statement, your why me page, your about me page, and ask yourself the question, does it paint a realistic picture of who I am and what I'm capable of? Does it paint a realistic picture that someone could recognize if they just passed it on the street and said, I can recognize that work. I can recognize that work. I can see by what's being done, the heart behind it. I understand the mission. I understand the statement. I understand the purpose and the passion and the power that's in that. And I want to be a part of it. If your mission statement, if your vision statement doesn't resonate with people on an emotional level where they see the work that's being done, they know what your agenda is, they recognize the narrative and they say, that's a story I want to be a part of. If it doesn't do that, then getting buy-in is going to be really, really hard. Getting buy-in from investors, getting buy-in from customers, getting buy-in from teammates who are supposed to help you pull this off. If your vision statement isn't a clear narrative that they can see themselves as a part of the story, it's going to be really hard for you to pull it off. Take the time to look back as a leader and ask yourself, is this a story, a narrative that genuinely brings about transformation and makes other people say, I want to be a part of the story? If it doesn't, take some time to rewrite. And if you're curious whether or not that story you've been telling, that narrative that you possess, has the impact that you want it to, just go to the website, storypowermasterclass.com, and just click on that little link there that says, I want the assessment. Go through the quick assessment, and if necessary, there's a 15-minute audit. I'll jump on the phone with you. I'll listen to what you have to say from the sake of your narrative or your story, and I'll give you some honest feedback about it. I'd love to help you if that would be a benefit to you. Again, I'll put it on the screen, storypowermasterclass.com, and the assessment is right there on the page. You can just fill it out, sign up for an audit if you want one, or just consider the questions that are being asked and decide if that's for you or not. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.